another video, regarding these holiday videos. It's made 4, half-hour videos, quote mining and then doing some kind of pantomime as a response to arguments, and it's unwatchable, so I haven't been able to watch more than this video. 3-minute mark is all it's going to get. I'll continue to play this. This is his response to the fact that communication with other people, even going to school, being educated, making arguments, changes people's brains and affects how things turn out. It's like Roosevelt making a good speech and everybody showing up for World War II, that kind of thing. That's what's required. Sometimes it's propaganda, sometimes it's bullshit, but the point is, purposes are understood by individuals, they communicate it to other individuals, and it either makes sense or doesn't make sense to them, and the world changes, and that's how it happens. Our intelligence is communicated between us. We've all heard of the Wright brothers. See? The knowledge goes from one person to another person to another person to another person. Yeah. And this is his response to the idea that communication works. Just absolute rubbish.
Go lay my head down to sleep. Let me wish all night long for a better world.
Right. So it's just praying. If, like I said, you make an argument that Adolf Hitler is going to take over Europe and ruin the world, and people show up and fight. That's just praying. That's religion. You're a fucking idiot. You're just too stupid. So let's get part 3 over with too. We might as well start it because it looks like it's just another absolutely stupid antic video. So might as well play a little bit of it and see how much of it's worth paying any attention to, which won't be any of it.
Let's just think here for a minute.
You're not capable.
The context is determinism, the lack of free will, and the potential for morality. All we have heard from Mendham is how we ought to choose the better way.
No, that's not what you heard from me. What you heard from me is that obviously our intelligence has evolved over, I always use 10,000 years as a real marker. But, so anyway, we already know it's a nothing video because you can't properly paraphrase me. I've never argued that we should choose a better way. I've argued that the people who know better have to communicate that to the people who don't know better. And they don't do that because of asshole nihilist motherfuckers like you. You're the very reason the world sucks. You give you a little bit of education and that's all you got. It's a little bit of education. It's not enough to do anything right. You only have half of the 2 and half of the 2, and so you can't make a full 4 because you're a stupid cunt. One dumb motherfucker. Yeah. Jesus, come on, camera. This isn't that complicated, camera. Come on, little tripod thing. Really, shouldn't be over your your qualification level. I guess I'll just cover the determinism word again. And I noticed in a trick comment they were arguing over holidays now, making the accusation that if you learn something, that's called you're a compatibilist now. Now you believe in some kind of fake free will because your brains change because of education. And it's just such a silly notion. So yeah, he's not a determinist, he's a fatalist. He thinks that there's no processing to the fact of how we get to determinism. That somehow the outcome is the same no matter what you change in the equation. And that's just idiotic. It's all made out of the causes and effects, and part of the causes and the effects are the fact that individuals change their minds and they speak their minds. And that's part of the process of the evolution of our culture. And clearly I've spoken in these videos about the evolution of culture. And culture is made up of the people in the culture. Yes, surprise, surprise. And if they're idiots, then you have idiocracy. And if they aspire, they have a notion in their head that the truth matters and that making a fair argument matters, then they do rational things like that, making fair arguments. And when they play somebody's video, they play the whole video. So they have to hear all the words, not just the words they want to hear. That kind of stuff. Just little pieces of honesty that these people can't manage. All right, so I'll get to the 3 minutes of video I watched in the other video. Because he just asked this, he keeps phrasing this as if these questions haven't been answered over and over, and it's just stupid. So he implies that, again, this is from nowhere. Our knowledge comes from nowhere. That if I say something like we can figure out the bad economics, that it's not productive behavior to drink and drive, because we can add up the numbers and say, what are you gaining and what are you losing? Well, you're gaining a little tiny bit of convenience for specific individuals who are potentially going to put other people at risk. So they're committing two crimes, essentially. The first crime is to think, even if it was other guys just like themselves, even if they were putting other drunks at risk, drunk drivers at risk, it would be stupid, because the economics don't make any sense. A little bit of convenience for horrible flaming death. Yes, it's a stupid equation. But it's even a worse equation when you're taking the risk part of what you're doing, applying it to somebody else. That makes it even more egregious as a crime against logic. And it is logic, based on factual understanding that drunk driving does not cure cancer, that drunk driving doesn't pave roads, that drunk driving isn't even good for trees. It just doesn't have any bright side. It's just all downside. And so we figure out that's a bad thing. And we just go through that without each human behavior. You can, slice and dice the pieces and figure out what value is at stake and what's at risk and whether there's any hope of it being a productive equation. Some things will be really hard to figure out. Like, I've used the example, and it's a good example, I think, malaria, for example. You could have a pile of money and say, okay, we've decided to do something, but how do you spend the money? Do you spend the money treating the symptoms of malaria, treating the current sufferers, preventing the people who exist now from getting malaria, or do you spend the money on research that might cure malaria, might prevent it from ever happening ever again? It's a hard decision, because you have to evaluate potentials that you can't really know. What's your odds of curing the disease? Will you just be wasting the money if that's what you try to do? So it's a difficult decision because of our lack of knowledge. And that's where it's obvious how knowledge decides these things. Knowledge makes the decision. When we don't have knowledge, we're in trouble. When we do have knowledge of outcomes, we're not in trouble. It's pretty much that simple. All right, so he said something like, I also have scorn for deplorable behaviors. It's not the point. The part where we overlap isn't the point. The point is where we underlap. And that includes just about everywhere else. That includes the 90% of the behaviors where you aren't capable of making a decision, and decisions need to be made, and where there's a whole pile of rights that you're not interested in protecting. You're going to have to wait. Yes, you are. There's a whole bunch of rights you're not interested in protecting because you haven't done what I would call the simple logic of recognizing our origins as being biological, and that there's a whole class of organisms that carry the same properties as we do in terms of their vulnerability to pain and suffering and torture, and that you have every bit of an obligation to them that you have to any other human in terms of protecting them from torture. And your vacuous, empty, vacant, non-existent, reasonable reply to that accusation of being a bigot is quite obvious, and that's all you are, is a bigot. All right, plucking value out of thin air. So he's arguing that it's thin evidence that torture is bad. It's thin evidence that the feelings of sensitive creatures matter. That's not something well evidenced by your own personal experience. And again, it's the only way you can know what it is to be conscious. You have to be conscious. If I was to have I've said this before, but if I had a supercomputer and all I could do was talk to it about what consciousness is, I'm probably not going to convince it that it matters. Because it would have to know it. It would have to feel it. It would have to have some sense of it. You'd have to make it feel bad. So it could say, oh, now I get it. Oh, yeah, that's a bad thing, feeling bad. Let's not do that. But until I make it feel it, it's going to be hard for it to be convinced that there is such a thing. But clearly all of us have feelings. We all recognize the difference between them in terms of their quality. There's no such thing as any thin evidence. To call it thin air or thin evidence is just obnoxiously defiant of volumes and volumes. Like I said, there's no space in my brain where I have any doubt that it matters, and that I have no reasoned philosophy that in any way can say, oh, it's all just a cartoon, and you can torture us on paper forever and ever and ever, and I can write the word torture forever and it doesn't hurt at all. It's nothing like that. It's significant and real, and it matters. And it's obvious, like I said, in every moment of my breathing life, I've been quite aware of how important it is that I don't fall into a torture trap. All right. So again, I'll do a little more on learning 2 + 2 = 4 is compatibilism. So by his inane reasoning, you're somehow objecting to determinism by arguing that there is a difference between smart and stupid, and and that individuals have to be smart. They have to know the right answer, and then they have to tell somebody else, hey, I have a better answer, and then they have to make an argument convincing them it's a better answer. And that's the process, and that's the factual history of human development on planet Earth, our growth as organisms, and our ability to collect and analyze correctly data and evidence. And yes, there's lots of places where people have done that wrong. There's lots of people who think rich people make money. They make it happen in the economy. They make extra money fall into the economy. They actually think rich people don't take money out of the economy. They don't think when they buy a yacht that money now doesn't buy a turbine for a hydroelectric plant. They think they can have both. They can have the turbine for the hydroelectric plant and the yacht. They can magically do some sort of, what do they call that with the stupid photons, being in two places at once and entangled. They can somehow entangle those two things. No, you can't entangle them. It's either or. That's the reality of life on planet Earth. The rich don't make us richer. They just take more pie and then run away and hide it. They make resources scarce and make you have to pay more for them. Period. But anyway, I'm just saying these are just facts, and you can get facts wrong. So yes, lots of people have the facts wrong, and Hoffaday is a perfect example of an imbecile who has the facts way wrong. All right, so he did a little more of his pantomime about I know, I desire, I want, and clearly I've argued it doesn't work that way. I wouldn't even put the word want in. You would say something like, it would be desirable that people not drink and drive. Let's do whatever we can to encourage people and discourage people appropriately to that cause. That would make sense. But clearly eyes have to know things. That's just a fact. Individuals will know and individuals will put the math together and say that 2 plus 2 equals 4, which is the only solution is, or one of the only solutions is, or some kind of phraseology. But some things are going to be obvious. They're going to have one right answer, and other things are going to have, grades of answer. There's plan A, the good plan, and then there's plan B, which might work a little bit, and plan C that, oh yeah, well, it's better than going the opposite direction. You might be going forward. You can have grades and quality of, it's like healthcare solutions. You can have ones that are bad, and then you can come up with something that's even worse. Trumpoxor. Yes. Anyway. It's just, And then we're back to the argument that what causes is cause and effect, and part of the cause and effect chain is education. Cause and effect is being enlightened and acquiring knowledge of. And I think we all in our life experience recognize that there's moments in our lives when we did things that were embarrassingly stupid in hindsight, because we have a better understanding. We acquire a better understanding. We acquire, ooh, that was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I should have done this, this, and this, because that would have been the better thing to do, and I should have taken care of that, and I should have worried more about this, or all that stuff. Because we acquire knowledge through our experience of dangers and risks, and we appreciate how we may have imposed or taken without being as considerate, responsible to the needs of the other people as we should have been. All of that stuff is acquired through edumacation. And to deny that process as existing and being part of the determinism is just silly. There's no fatalistic end. The end will be achieved through a process of these interactions. The interactions all have to take place. They all have significance. If Martin Luther King never existed, the world would be a different place. It's just a fact. So whatever antics or words or things that had to take place with him as an interactor were important to the way the future turned out. And the same thing is true of your own existence. If somebody can say inspiring words to you and do something, you watch a movie or something, it gives you a perspective or a point of view you hadn't appreciated before, and it will change who you are. And it may motivate you to do something about a problem or get involved. I could say as a personal example, I never gave a whole lot of thought to the subject of pet creation and the liabilities of all the feral animals being created, especially for cats. I mean, society has a lot less tolerance for feral dogs, and so it doesn't let that problem get as big out of hand, because dogs are a threat to humans, packs of dogs, to the welfare of lots of things. But the cats, they just treat them like rats. They just treat them like poorly. And then the people who think they care and they love these animals are under this delusion that they're doing them a favor by, cutting their privates off and shoving them back out into the world to eke out an existence in, cruel reality. And I'm motivated to say I have to do something. I have to say something about this on this subject, because it is a very large horror being created by the combination of two interests. People who really love cats and people who don't give a shit. And those two people have found a common interest. And I'd even say that there's an economic interest to the vets are taking advantage of, veterinarians. They have these insanely high prices for euthanizing animals. They've made it incredibly impractical, and they won't even do it. You can ask them, and they won't do it. They won't gracefully put down feral animals, because they know they can make more money doing the cut their nuts off surgery, and giving them a bunch of shots, and then throwing them out in the wild. And it's just pathetically cruel, in my opinion. It's like people who defend the need for us to have way too many deer, and the same kind of problem. The price, the social costs are so high, all the damage they've done, and then after having Lyme disease 11 times, for what? To have giant rats roam our woods. It's just stupid. And people should make arguments about how stupid it is, and how you're not being good to the animals by forcing them to live a hard and brutal, and generally speaking, short life as, tire food. 30,000 deers are hit by cars here. That's just the reported ones. Every year. You're not doing them a favor. So anyway, probably enough of a video. But to say that that the substance of our function is all robotic, in the sense that we are bombarded by bits of information, by personal experiences. They impose upon us perspective, and that perspective is realized in our actions and words into the world, and that is the process of determinism. It is determined that we will be either smart or stupid. My argument is that we're only going to be stupid if we're obnoxious fatalists and are religious kooks. And you can call Hoffley either one, it doesn't matter. But he's stupid not to realize that what he has to generate in people, what's needed in the world if we're going to have a good future, is a great deal of respect for logic and the evidence and the facts. And the facts glaringly point to, in my opinion, without any doubt, the significance of the sentient experience, and that it is in fact precious, the welfare of feeling things, and we have to maximize that value equation. Less torture. Less torture. Get rid of the bad. You don't really have much else to worry about. So if you just focus on the bad, that's job one. And maybe it only goes as high as one. Get job one done, the rest of the jobs are done. So anyway, enough of a video, no point in... I've been over this stuff so many times. It's, and like I said, his video is beneath response. It's crap. Incredible crap. Anyway, till next time.